So this says homelessness in Los Angeles dates back to the late 19th century when migrant workers arrived in droves on the Southern Pacific Railroad. Oh my God. And history just looks like it's repeating itself. We haven't dealt with the homelessness. And this is talking about the going as far back as the late 19th century. Here we are in 2024, and we're letting more people in now than we ever did when we have more people that live within the country and that need and that pay and that work and that pour into the the country in order to be able to benefit from some of the, or when in need to be able to benefit from some of the resources that are made available, whether it's on a federal level, state, or local. But now we're you got kids in New York City that are being sent home to learn remotely from school while they house the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, into those schools. I don't know where they do that at. I ain't never seen a country outside of this. I never knew this country would do it, but I've never seen a country outside of our country that has ever done anything to that magnitude. And there's a lot of countries that are less suited for outside people coming in. But I mean, I have to have a passport to go outside this country, and most of us do. So I'm not understanding how we got here, but nevertheless, we are here, right? So let's see.
Los Angeles during that time period was a place where young white men would come to find work. You had single room occupancy hotels, you had bars. And so like the early Skid Row of Los Angeles is kind of the story of young downtown Los Angeles, of young people coming in, trying to find their way and then moving on to their next location. Now Skid Row becomes the Skid Row that we know of it in the 1940s and 1950s when that population begins to stay.
If you haven't been to the Skid Row area, it's horrifying. It's heartbreaking. An area of 50 plus blocks in downtown LA where the services were all in place there. The shelters were all in place.
So in the 1970s, you see this explosion of all of these services in these communities. And the communities responded by saying, we don't want these services in our communities. We want them somewhere else. And that somewhere else became Skid Row.
For a long time, the solution to homelessness was to contain it, as opposed to trying to come up with actual solutions. It was basically, if they're out of sight, out of mind kind of approach.
There was a very distinct border of who was in Skid Row and like where they were allowed to go. And so there was this buffer of Skid Row from the rest of downtown Los Angeles. Even like the street signs and the crosswalks were different. If you were in Skid Row compared to the other side of downtown LA, there were more police at the borders, etc.
And to think that that's an American city in the heart of Los Angeles, just blocks away from the finance capital of Los Angeles, you see this is horrific. And it's something that we should all as a nation be ashamed of, that we've allowed the policies to exist to create this sort of environment in the middle of our city.
We had a huge issue in the late 1990s, early 2000s of other cities sending their homeless populations into Los Angeles. People being dropped off on Greyhound with a one-way ticket just dropped into the middle of Skid Row in the middle of it.
Sound familiar? See all these tour buses making all these, with these companies making all this money by busing the migrants from one city to the next. Even in some instances, they're flying people back home or here or to and fro, wherever they want to go. I ain't never seen somebody give me a free ticket to go where I want to go, especially coming in from the United States into a foreign country. So y'all can tell I'm feeling some type of way about that. But there's definitely a lot of similarities. So it's always said, if you want to know what your future is going to look like, then look at the past. And so this has been eye-opening for me because, of course, I wasn't here at the beginning of the 19th century, but now historically, this is being revealed to us that this is not the first time that they've done this. So that just reinforces my ideology that this is by design and it's intentional. So now what I want to do on a personal level is I want to find out exactly what the outcome of this was and how it fit into the agenda of the government to allow this statewide and federal, right? And so it may give us an idea as to what direction we're currently going in, because it seems like history is definitely repeating itself. So, yeah, that's where we are with that.
and I
Hold on. I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I think the point has been made. So just bear with me here. I've got some 2247, some markers that emphasize some certain points. Okay, so here's a statistic I wanted to cover. Okay, no, I want to go. Yeah, that man I want to hear. Let's see.
2008, I had a construction company, and the economy just hit. I was frustrated that hit.
Our situation was due to financial strain, not to drug addiction, not to alcoholic addiction, not to the lack of education or effort, but to the fact that we were struggling in terms of having enough finances to pay for a roof over our head.
How many people are one paycheck away from being on the street? How many people have family members that they can call and be reassured that they won't end up on the street until they can transition and recuperate from whatever situations they're currently going through? How many of us are one paycheck away from looking like these people we're looking at on this screen? When I say that this is humbling, it is humbling for me personally, because it reminds me, and I'm not saying that God is not in these people's lives. I can only speak and say that I know he's working in mine, because there have been several instances where this could have easily have been me at some point in my life. And it wasn't. And by God's grace, I'm grateful for that. And it empowers me to pray for those that are going through what I have been spared. So this says 59% of newly homeless in LA County cite economic hardship as their main reason for ending up on the street. That's over half, y'all. Hey Trina, what we doing? Hey Nene, thank you for coming in. I know this hits home for Trina, because she's out here amongst the people, blessing them on a day-to-day basis. And so that we definitely, I want to say thank you. We want to say thank you, Trina, because we know what you're doing, right? So much love. But 59% of newly homeless in LA County cite economic hardship. We can't forget that California is one of the most expensive places to live, or states to live. So, you know, when you go and you relocate, or you're raised and, you know, your job income does not meet the demands of the prices of the cost of living, it's going to definitely cause some strife, right? And that's over half. So that's not surprising, but at the same time, it's like once you see it in writing and in numbers, it kind of resonates differently for me.
There are those with drug addiction, with a criminal record, with the mental health issues. We've all seen them. There's also the mother who lost her job, who's in a domestic violence situation and just had to get out, living in the car with the kids.
Just went through domestic violence, stayed too long, eventually was like, yo, this is not the life I want for my kids. I never want my daughter to feel like it's okay to be hit, and I never want my boys to feel like it's okay to hit. So it's time to leave. And I left. And that then left me homeless and at risk.
So this says 32.4% of LA's county homeless populations is female. And of that 32.4%, 49% report a history of domestic violence. So we got 32% of the homeless population are women. Let that sit and resonate for a second. Wow. Cece said everything is expensive. Man, listen. Now it just seems like you used to be able to decipher, you know, and know that you were living in a certain region of the country based off of the cost of living, you know, the land, the real estate, the food, the accessibility. Now it's just all coming together to seem like everything is looking the same across the board.
Being a female out here alone, if you guys only knew what we go through. I got stabbed. Bad man.
She's been stabbed. And she's still out there. Now you talking about mental health being challenged. Can you imagine being stabbed and you still have to navigate and live out in the same environment that you were wounded and that you were attacked in? This is crazy.
In my own spot. I got raped out here.
We're all focused on the visible homeless out there, when in actuality, the overwhelming population of the homeless are the invisible homeless.
I think of that young man from foster care who was couch surfing. That's homeless. I think of the young girl from foster care who was living in her car and she'd shower at the Y each day.
Foster youth, unfortunately, represents a large portion of the homeless population. And because of the lack of services, or wraparound services, of when these individuals turn 18, we start to see like a really big increase by the age of 21 of these individuals living on the streets.
My bad, y'all. 1 in 4 of California's former foster youth report having experienced homelessness in the 2 years after aging out of the system. So that's a quarter. That's a quarter of, so 1 in 4 that come out of the foster system end up homeless at some point. And to me, this all goes back to the lack of support, the lack of community, the lack of our natural affinity to care about our fellow brother and sister, the welfare. You got immediate family members that don't care, sadly, sometimes if their sister, their brother, their mother, their father, their child, their aunt, their uncle, if anything happens to them, they're able to just get past it and move on. They're not there for each other. You have parents or mom and dads or matriarch and patriarchs of the family that passed away, and the children are fighting over stuff. And so with this lack of familial energy, the homelessness is going to continue to deteriorate and get worse.
When you're in foster care, you're often bouncing around from home to home. So already you lack stability. You perhaps have lost touch with the birth family. And then if you have lost time in school, you're behind in your education, how much do you feel about yourself? And so we expect these kids to emancipate from the system and say, here you go, world, have at it.
It's so hard when you get out of that system and you're looking for like the resources or the support, and you're going to people who've never experienced these things. They can't relate. They're like, well, why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just, it's not that easy.
Of all the people experiencing homelessness, African Americans are disproportionately represented.
You know where the black community in LA is now? It used to be Leimert Park. You know where it is now? Skid Row.
So the black population as a percentage, 9% of LA County, 33% of that 9% are homeless, and 59% is on Skid Row. You telling me this is not by design? Trina says, Ms. Akemi, I just have one person I feed every day died on me when it snowed in Memphis. I went to his funeral Saturday. My condolences, Trina. My goodness, that's a horrific way, in my opinion, to go. However, I'm praying that they are at peace and that you have found some peace through that experience as well, because at least they're not suffering anymore. Michelle Thought says people would be surprised at the violence that goes on amongst the homeless people. Yeah, I don't know if I would be surprised. I'm just going to keep it 100. It's like you got this cocktail of people being paranoid, of being uncertain about, where their next meal is going to come from. So now they're anxious a lot of drugs, a lot. Now you got to deal psychologically. The whole composition of your brain has been altered because your life has been altered. And now the things that you didn't have to focus on and worry about before, now they're number 1 and 2 on the priority list of survival mode, right? So let me just I'm gonna play a little bit more of this, and I'm gonna go to the mental health clip, which I think is very important, and it ties into what we're talking about.
Well, let's look at the history of the African American population in LA alone. We've all heard of redlining, or lack of ability to get a home loan, or lack of services, or mass incarceration. If you have generations of families without a father in the home, or an ability to climb the ladder of your career, then you're going to have systemic problems.
What would you tell people about life as a homeless man? It ain't fun out here. Don't trust anybody. I don't know. I don't want to be homeless anymore, that's for sure.
Based on the history of black folks in America coming out of Jim Crowism, 99 years of that, and then 245 years of chattel slavery, and all it has generational effects. Black homelessness manifested as a consequence of systemic racism.
You can't deny racial inequity or institutional bias in our country when you see homelessness disproportionately affects people of color. It also disproportionately affects the elderly.
When you turn a certain age in life, they start putting them in a box, and those jobs for older people that you could count on, they didn't deal with that anymore. It's more for the young people. And my husband is a veteran, and he worked hard for what he does and how he does it, but things didn't work out that way.
These statistics are alarming to me. Miss, your thoughts? Yes, everyone is in survival mode daily. However, sis, when I walk out my house, my senses are a lot more acute than they are within the confinements of my 4 walls. So I totally agree with you. We definitely, but I think there are also different levels of survival mode as well. So no, definitely there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. So this says among LA County's homeless, nearly 6,300 are seniors over 62 years old, and more than 3,900 are veterans. Veterans, OMG. The way that the veterans are treated in this country is shameful. I feel that way about elderly people too, but the veterans definitely first on the list. They have always been easily, in my opinion, discarded once they come back and they're no longer active duty. And now the resources and the benefits and perks of being in active duty or becoming military, they just either they're not as they were described, or they haven't been shown how to access those and navigate through the eyes of the military, retired, active duty. I may not be saying that right, but I think you kind of picking up what I'm putting down. I just feel like the veterans are sorely and severely mistreated, underappreciated, and undervalued. And that to me has always put the way that this the do dirties actually govern this country. I've always thought that they were POSs, right?
When we think about all the ways people can enter homelessness, oftentimes what we see is that our system has failed. Not the homeless services system, because we catch them when they get here, but the other social safety nets have failed.
There are all sorts of individual stories for homelessness, which is why it's impossible to have one giant solution to homelessness, because homelessness is a collection of 40,000 individual problems in Los Angeles and 70,000 individual problems in Los Angeles County and 150,000 problems in the state of California. Every story is unique.
That part, right? So I think I mentioned that earlier in the stream, is that everybody has their own personal experience and journey that led them to become homeless, and nobody's 2 stories are the same. I think also a lot of these programs are federal, And so when you're dealing with federal programs, everything is put into a box, and it's a one size, seems like they have a one size fits all approach to solving an individualistic problem, and a tailor-made journey to how they got to that point. So you know, and then of course there's always seems to be an end or a cap on those resources, because as soon as that phase is open, or that deadline, or that federally funded program opens, then there's a deadline. Unless that cap has been reached, people are going to be acute to that, and they're going to scuffle for that, and they're going to compete to be first. And so definitely the need is a lot greater than the availability and the resources. And so that in this system has miserably failed